Hello friends, welcome back to another video. Today I am showing you how to set up Home Assistant on a Raspberry Pi. We're specifically going to use a Raspberry Pi 5 for this, and there's a little backstory as to why I'm setting this up today, so stay tuned. Now before we jump into it, I want to state that you can set up Home Assistant on a number of different devices in a number of different ways. You can use anything from a Raspberry Pi like we'll be setting up today, all the way up to a mega computer or a Synology NAS, or just a number of different ways you can set up a Home Assistant instance for your smart home. Today I'm going to show you what I'm using and how I host my Home Assistant instance. I'm not by any means an expert in this. For that, there are a number of other channels that you can go to. I will also only be going over the initial basic setup. I will, however, share some of my favorite plugins that I use with Home Assistant, and the number one thing I'll be doing is getting my Apple Home back in order. More on that in just a moment. So, let's talk about what I'm using for this setup. Now, if you followed my channel at all, you know that I've already had Home Assistant set up. I will be using a Raspberry Pi 5 for this setup. I was previously using a Raspberry Pi 4B, and if you've seen this video, you know that I run my Apple Home through Home Assistant and into Apple Home. Now, we use Apple Home in our house because we have a lot of free devices. We have iPhones, we have iPads, and it's just easy for my wife and I to use. So we use Apple Home. I would definitely recommend checking that video out after we get through this video to show you exactly how you can get all of your Apple Home devices into Home Assistant, back into Apple Home. The reason that I run Home Assistant is it gives you just so many more options of what you can put in your Apple Home. It also gives you a lot more options for automating things, and I'm a pretty heavy power user myself, so using Apple Home to control my home while I'm using Home Assistant to automate. And I also have custom dashboards, which I'll link a video to my custom dashboard down below as well. So I had a Raspberry Pi 4B, tried to migrate everything over to the Raspberry Pi 5. I backed it up. I probably did something wrong. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but in that backup, it did not move all of my Apple Home bridge over, meaning I lost about 65 devices from my Apple Home. But I spent all day the other day going through and updating, re-adding all of my devices to Apple Home that we lost. And now I'm on to step 2 of that process, which is setting up Home Assistant to work with my Apple Home again. I thought what better time to share a how-to video with you on how to set up Home Assistant, especially as an Apple Home user. So first you're going to need a Raspberry Pi for this, or a computer. If you're using a Raspberry Pi, you're going to need a micro SD card. Now I'm using a SanDisk 32 gig micro SD card. They do recommend a 32 gig and a high-speed one, so this one is ideal. It's a V30. And we are going to need a power supply, and I am using a 45 watt power supply from Canakit. So the last thing you need is a way to plug in Ethernet to this. It's going to be the best case scenario. I honestly don't know if you can run it off of Wi-Fi. I've never tried, but I like using Ethernet for anything I can. So with that being said, let's get into the setup. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to take that memory card and we're going to plug it into our computer, and we're going to use an app called Raspberry Pi Imager. You Google Raspberry Pi Imager and you'll find it. And so now that we have our memory card plugged in, we open Raspberry Pi Imager and we're going to choose device. And you're going to choose the Raspberry Pi that you're using. Like I said, I'm using a Raspberry Pi 5 for this. And now we're going to choose our OS. Now, you can use Raspberry Pis for so many different things. It's crazy. Today, obviously, we're going to use it to set up our Home Assistant. So we're going to go to Other Specific Purpose OS. You can see it says Home Automation. We're going to go down to Home Assistant and Home Automation, and we're going to select Home Assistant. And Home Assistant for Raspberry Pi 5. Last thing we're going to do is choose our storage. I see I only have the one option. It's 31.9 gigs. I know that's the right option. If it gives you any other options, just make sure you do not choose the wrong option. Make sure you're choosing that right memory card. The last thing you want to do is wipe your computer. I don't even know if that's even an option anymore, but it used to be, and it's terrifying. All right, now we'll hit next. So it's telling you here it's going to erase everything on that card. We're going to say yes. Go ahead and enter our password, and it's writing. All right, you can now remove the SD card from reader. Continue. Let's go ahead and close that. So the next step is to take our memory card, and we're going to find the slot on our Raspberry Pi, and we're just going to pop it right in there. There we go. And now that we have that done, let's go ahead and plug this into power and get it connected. Let's do that. I'll be right back. All right, so I should probably mention, when you're plugging that in, you're going to want to plug the Ethernet cable in first before you plug the power in. That just helps it so when it boots up, it knows there's Ethernet connected. You don't have to worry about any network issues when you do that. So when that boots up, it's going to boot up to a specific IP address. So you want to identify that IP address. So you can go into your actual router and you can go to client. It's going to take a little bit to update, because what it's doing is you plug that memory card in there and then you plugged it into power. So it's taking what you installed in that memory card and it is downloading it, it's opening it. It's just like a computer. The Raspberry Pi is a computer. Think of that memory card as the hard drive for that computer. You plug that in, it has the entire OS that it's booting up for the first time. So once that's up, it's going to know that, oh, I'm connected to Ethernet, and it's going to pop out an IP address. So once you've identified your IP, you're going to type your IP address into your bar, but don't hit enter. After you type your IP address, you're going to want to hit :8123. That is the port. So once you have that, boom, open it. You got Home Assistant. It says it's preparing. It says it may take 20 minutes. In my experience, it never takes that long. But let's let this do its thing, and then we'll come back to it. All right, and there it is. Let's create our smart home. We're going to call this one Steyerwalt. My username and password. And then it wants you to choose your address, so you're just going to find out where you live. All right, so here you can check whatever you want. This will help the Home Assistant team. Now, they're amazing. They're not going to use any of this data or information for things that are shouldn't be used for. So let's go ahead and select a few of those. And you can see here we found compatible devices. Once you get this up and running, it's going to automatically find devices on your network that you can use in Home Assistant. Samsung Smart TV, I can't get that in my Apple Home, so this will give me the ability to move that into my Apple Home. So it's not just allowing you to create better automations, it's also allowing you to bring devices into your Apple Home that may not have been there before. So let's go ahead and finish this up. And you can see once it gets booted up, you're going to have an overview. It's going to put some of those devices that it found on this overview automatically. I'm going to come back and change this at another point, but the purpose of this video is to get my Apple Home back in order with the devices that I want in my Apple Home. So, now the first device I want to get in my Apple Home that's not there right now is my garage door, which is a Tailwind garage door opener, which does work natively with Apple Home. However, because of the way I'm porting everything through Home Assistant and into Apple Home, I didn't want to re-add it to Apple Home. It's one of those devices I lost whenever I lost the Home Assistant integration. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to Settings and Devices and Services. And you're going to see it's discovered all of these devices. Everything from my Samsung TV to my Synology NAS, my Philips Hue, Apple TVs. It's going to give you all of these devices, but right here is the one I want, the Tailwind IQ3, and I'm going to need to get a token for that. So it's going to tell you down here, you can browse to the web portal and log in with your account and then select the local control key. So let's go ahead and click that, and I'll paste it here, and then I'll hit submit, and it's just that easy. So now I can put this, let's see, that is in my entrance. We're going to create a new area. We're going to create the entrance with, let's create some trees. Let's put some trees out there to show that we're outside. Yeah, forest. I don't live in a forest, but we'll use it. And then we can add floors in Home Assistant. I'm not going to do that right now. You can add labels. Again, not going to do that right now. I'm not going to add a picture of the area. We're going to just create this area as the entrance. That will allow me to then identify different devices based on the entrance later. All right. And just like that, if we go to our overview, you're going to see I now have my garage door in here. So I actually have done a whole video on how to get your devices into Apple Home. So in that video, I talk about going from Apple Home to Home Assistant and then back into Apple Home. I think I also talk about how to get just from Home Assistant to Apple Home. I go into much more depth. We're starting off with this garage door, and then if you want to see more in depth on how to do this, check out the two-part series. I'll link it down in the description. All right, so now before we can do anything else, we need to go to our notifications, and we're going to see a HomeKit pairing code right here. That's how we're going to get this bridge into our Apple Home. So on my phone, I'm going to go to my Apple Home. I'm going to add an accessory, and I'm going to scan that just like if I were adding any other accessory. And you're going to see there it says bridge, add to home, uncertified. We're going to add that anyway. We know it's uncertified. We're going to put that in our studio. Leave it as Hass Bridge and add. And there you go, bridge added to Steyerwalt Home. Garage door. So if you add all your devices up front, it's going to walk you through all of this configuration for every single device. So it's got my garage door. I'm going to add it to the entrance, and we're going to call that garage door because I only have one, so why not just call it garage door? Then I can tell you know who to open the garage door, close the garage door. It is, you have our garage door right there. You can see a lot of these devices are no response. I actually unplugged my internet earlier and my home hub went offline, so I got to reconfigure all that. Just been a mess. But garage door right there. All right, so now that we have Home Assistant set up and running, I want to change a couple of settings before we move on into the next part of the video. So first and foremost, I want to update my users. I use this for a lot of zone automations. So I want to create some automations that use my phone and my wife's phone. So we'll start with mine. I don't want to be called Steyerwalt. I want to be called Delenn. I'm going to add my own picture and just make sure all of this is correct, and it is. And then I would want to add my wife, allow login. You want to set a specific password for every user, and she already knows this password. So, and then I want to make sure she has access outside of the home, as well as is not an administrator because she just gets overwhelmed by this stuff. So create. All right, so now we got a couple people set up. Let's look at Home Assistant Cloud. Highly recommend Home Assistant Cloud. This is how you're going to access it from outside of the home. So let's get that set up. Now, it's going to use a service called Nabu Casa. I've already had this set up, obviously. So I can just sign in. So I would highly recommend setting up your Nabu Casa account. Nabu Casa is who owns Home Assistant and who runs Home Assistant. Highly recommend it. It's also going to give you access to text-to-speech, so you can use their chat assistant. You can set up other chat assistants. Definitely do that. And then lastly, we want to add a couple add-ons. So file editor is one that I always use. That's going to give you access to be able to edit the YAML files or your configuration files. Must have. So we're going to go ahead and install that. And we want to show it in sidebar. I will do watchdog so it'll restart automatically if it crashes. All right, so now that we have all that set up, if we go to our home, our overview, you're going to see our garage door is here. You're also going to see the people that we have here. It says it doesn't know our location. I haven't set up devices. Now, in order to set it up for location services, all you're going to want to do is get the Home Assistant app on your phone, and you're going to want to set up your server, add server. It's going to automatically find your server, and then you just want to log in. So then after you get that added, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to that server and you're going to hit activate, and then it's going to pull up your dashboard right there on your phone. Beautiful, looks great. Now, if I were to go to settings, people, myself, scroll down to the bottom, now that I have an app set up for it, it's going to ask me which device I want to track. So obviously the device that I just set up, we're going to update that. So now if I go to my overview, it's going to find my device is at home, and it knows that because I set my home address at the very beginning. Now if you were to want to set other areas or zones, you can go to areas, labels, and zones, and then click zones. I'm not going to do that because I don't want to show where my house is on the map, but that is how you set up those different areas. So alright, so that's going to do it for this video. Like I said, that's just the initial setup. I have so much more to do, so I'm going to go work on that. But I just want to say thank you so much for watching. If I missed anything or you have any questions, drop them down in the comments. I'd be happy to answer anything I can. It'll also help me, anything you want to see another video on. I might do another video on some of the automations that I set up. I've done that in the past in a video that I'll link down below as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a Home Assistant playlist for all of these videos that you can find right here. And here's a video that YouTube thinks you're going to enjoy as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.